There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cameron Chronicles. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, here with my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing? How's your break, man?
It was good. It was relaxing. How about you?
It was good. Yeah, mine was very relaxing, too. Our two guests, though, did not have a very relaxing break. Spent their spring breaks in Washington, D.C. We have Andrew Long, our sports editor, and Rachael Kaplan, our sports managing editor. Welcome to the podcast, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us again.
Yeah, awesome. So we got a lot to get through today. We've the last time we recorded was before the UNC game, but today we'll talk about the ACC tournament. Duke lost to NC State in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament, 74-69. We'll talk about that, and then Selection Sunday was last Sunday. Duke is a 4 seed in the South region. We'll preview Duke's matchups, possible further matchups down the line in the South region. And then we'll just go through kind of our bracket breakdowns for each of us, talk about some sleepers, Final Four predictions, do all that. It'll be a fun episode. Super excited. But just to start out, I guess we'll talk about the ACC tournament. For some takeaways, so, Duke came out of the gate and was really slow and could just never quite get back into it. But Andrew, I'll start with you. I'm curious, why do you think, Duke lost the game, and what are some of the biggest factors you saw in NC State winning?
I think the first thing that just needs to be acknowledged with that game overall is, superstitious or not, that run was magical.
Yeah.
Right? Like NC State was playing maybe the best basketball of any team all year in like that 5-day span. We saw that with their crazy win against Virginia the day after. We saw that with the final win against Carolina the day after that. And so I do think a lot of it just came down to the fact that NC State worked their butts off like to win that game. So credit where credit's due. But on Duke's end, the slow starts have got to stop. Like that is going to be this team's vice in March. If there is a vice in March, that's what it's going to be. I think Kyle Filipowski and Mark Mitchell both played really well on the offensive end, but when you have that little guard production, especially early on, like the first points of the game were Rachael, 4-ish minutes in, and it was Jared
3.5 minutes in.
3.5 minutes in, and it was Jared McCain making free throws after missing 2 free throws earlier. And so I think that like what the loss can be boiled down to is a lot of things that NC State was doing well, but also Duke just shooting itself in the foot early and kind of stumbling a lot before it could even get going. And by that point, NC State already had a buffer, and could just kind of, they didn't even have to pull away. Like they kind of just rode what they were doing. And that's what carried them to a win.
Yeah. Rachael, what about you?
Yeah, I wrote about the slow starts after that game, and that's definitely been an issue that, Duke, especially the past 3 games, Duke has really been struggling with. And so, I mean, if you watch that game at all, you saw Jared McCain had a bandage over his, I believe it was his right eye. He had stitches pregame. I'm really curious how much that affected his play. I know he said after the game, I should be able to make those shots with my eyes closed, but if you can't really see out of your right eye, that's going to affect your play. And so I'm really curious to see how he comes out now that he's fully healed. I think the big thing to think about is that Jeremy Roach, this team's senior, its captain, he has not been the same player that he was for most of the season for the last 2 games. Whether the emotions of senior night just got to him and now he's in his head, he is taking a lot of the blame for how this team is playing. He said that both after the UNC game and after the loss to NC State. He kept saying, this is on me. And so I think seeing how he comes out in these first few rounds, in the first round, and if they make it farther than that, but seeing how he comes out, if he's able to get back to the, consistent leader that he is on that court, I think that's really what's going to be telling about this team. But he definitely did not look himself in those last 2 games.
Can I also add a little thing about Foster? Because I think like the narrative around Caleb Foster is sort of just that he's out now, so he's not a factor. But I really think if you have a Caleb Foster in a game like that, it changes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because Tyrese Proctor has played 40 minutes in 3 consecutive games.
Yeah.
And so, for a team that likes to play with 3 guards, if you only have 3 guards to choose from, like, what do you do? And so part of it might just be these guys are tired. Like Jeremy Roach and Proctor just played exhausted. They kind of looked. Jared was in his head. And I mean, they certainly have some rest from now. They had plenty of rest between the Carolina game and the NC State game, so I don't really know what's up, if it's a preparation thing. But I don't know how sustainable it is to like expect 40 minutes out of one of your guards every single game, and especially in a tournament setting where you're going to be playing a lot of stuff back to back to back. Yeah, so I mean, we'll get into more tournament stuff later. I honestly, I don't have a whole lot of reservations about like whether or not Duke can beat teams. I think it's just a matter of like which Duke shows up, and if they're playing tired, and especially if their guards, which have been the main source of its offense all year, are playing tired. Like that's kind of the real worry for me.
Yeah, a one-man show of Kyle Filipowski going and scoring 25, 30 points a game is only going to take them so far. And in the NCAA tournament, that is not very far.
Also, like speaking on the Caleb Foster point, bench points, 0. Like that's I think especially in an NCAA tournament, like rotations are shorter. You're not going to have as much bench production, but like 0 points is just not going to cut it. And like Caleb Foster would provide that lift on the bench. And it's interesting because Shire has turned to forwards Sean Stewart and TJ Power, both who have looked really good in spurts, but just have not put together consistent performances enough off the bench to really add up to Duke's productivity on the floor. So that's definitely something that needs to improve. Rachel, you mentioned Jeremy Roach. I thought it was interesting. He talked about after the game how he's going to hold a players only meeting before the tournament, and I think that's really important just to kind of reset everybody and get turn the page. I think this week is going to be really big. The week after. The NC State game and then leading up to the Vermont game, because I remember after that Georgia Tech loss back in December, Duke had a week of practice, just no games in practice because Duke had a lot of games back to back to back. But in the Charlotte game, it was a little game, but Duke won, and I covered it. Shire said in his press conference, like, this was the best week of practice we've had all year because we didn't do any game prep. We didn't have an opponent we were focusing on. We were just working on ourselves. And I think something similar like that could happen this week. And I think just a good week of practice with rest, but also not in your like game prep routine, just not focusing on a specific opponent will be really helpful for the team. So we'll see how much that helps. But
So if you're Shire, like what's the main thing that you're working on?
right now, like a lot of the slow starts have to do with just focus and discipline on everything and getting out and running your sets. I think sometimes the offense looked a little bit discombobulated, like especially in the last couple of minutes. There's this one possession where Proctor was just kind of dribbling around and looking for screens, and it led to a Jeremy Roach turnover. But I think some of the offense at the end has been a little bit discombobulated. So I would say like situational basketball is really important. And then just making sure like the mentality of the players are right coming out and being focused game in and game out. I think that'll be really important down the stretch. And just rest, honestly. Like some of the players have dealt with injuries all the season. It's not a secret that Proctor had his injury. Roach has been dealing with injuries. So we'll see. But I think this could help. Caleb, any thoughts on the NC State game?
Yeah, just kind of going back to what you're saying about the bench. I thought it was interesting. Obviously, Sean Stewart and Ryan Young both played pretty well the first time Duke played NC State just a couple weeks ago, and both of them were pretty much non-factors. So I think going into the NCAA tournament, they're going to have either one of TJ Power and Sean Stewart, if not both, that need to be real spark plugs off the bench. Obviously, in different ways, TJ Power's the shooter and Sean Stewart's more of an athletic freak, but just for Shire to be able to have one of those guys that he can count on, depending on the matchup, to come in there and be like a contributor and can like easily go in there and make an impact in the game and not have 0 points combined between three guys over 19 minutes combined. So just going forward, I think they got to find at least one, if not 2 or 3 guys that can really come in and make a difference off the bench.
Yeah. All right. Well, good analysis, guys. So Duke is now in March Madness, so turning the page to the postseason. Like I said, Duke is the 4 seed in the South region. The first draw is the Vermont Catamounts. The American East champions are coming in at 28-6. They're the 13 seed, so that game's going to be Friday. I guess just looking at them, are there any things that you guys have seen from Vermont or some keys that you think will be important for Duke to move past the Catamounts there in round 1?
Yeah, I can start. I think obviously look at Vermont. They've been in the tournament a decent amount of times in recent history, and they're on a 10-game win streak right now. So obviously a hot team. The main thing with them, looking at kind of their stats, is they play really slow and they don't turn the ball over, which is a good recipe if you're trying to stay in a game as a lower seed. And I think they're going to play good basketball. They're 11th in turnover percentage in the country, so they don't turn the ball over. They're 349th in tempo, so almost last. And they're also, the other thing that stands out is they're very deep. They play like 10 guys pretty consistently, which Duke pretty much does the opposite of that now without Foster. So I think if Vermont can really slow it down and grind out Duke's starting five, they might have a chance to keep it close throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think um, their guards, like 3 of them average like 10 plus points a game, so they're very balanced, like you said. But also they play a very like stout, like pack line defense type, kind of like a Virginia-esque team, to where like they're gonna limit you to one shot, they're gonna force tough shots, they're gonna slow you down. So Duke's gonna have to really, like Andrew, I was talking to you about it just now, the offensive execution. That's gonna be really important in the half court because I think this game is gonna come down to half court plays. Um, Getting good shots and making those good shots, and a lot of that comes down to guard play. Like Rachael was saying, we haven't seen a lot of that from Duke recently, and that'll be super important. I also think Filipowski's going to have a size advantage on Vermont's bigs. That's not their strong suit, so he's been playing really well recently. So if he can continue that, that'll be good. And just like getting the nerves out, I think it's interesting. A lot of this team does not have that much NCAA tournament experience at all, besides Roach. So his veteran leadership is going to be super important, just to you know it's different playing in the March Madness. These teams are, playing with house money, especially somebody like Vermont. So making sure that they don't have the momentum and especially, in that first half, getting out to a big lead will be super important against them.
I think I may more just speak to like the areas that Vermont could exploit
Yeah.
on Duke's play. I think the first one you mentioned it is that guard play, and especially the fact that you're going to have one of them probably play 40 minutes. If you can kind of sub these guys in and out, you're going to have just more juice kind of from minute 1 to minute 41 in there, or I guess to the 40th minute, not like doesn't go past that. Anyway, uh, energy is a big deal in March, kind of across the board. The deeper your rotation, even if it's not as talented of a rotation, is still helpful, if for no other reason than to give your starters a minute or two extra rest. So I think that's going to be something I have an eye on. And then Caleb, I think your assessment about Stewart and Power is going to be super important, because one of the things that Duke did not do well in the NC State game was shoot in any way. They, I think, at one point were like 20% or less from three and 40% or less from the field. I can't remember what the figures were at the end of the game, but it was pretty putrid regardless. So if you can kind of have that extra little bit of consistency and especially consistent shooting from the bench, I think Duke can kind of coast through that pretty comfortably, but without it, I don't know. Who knows? Especially if somebody's kind of playing a slower tempo, like you've got to nail your shots, and that doesn't just go for Vermont, that goes for Duke too.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something Ranjan said a little bit earlier, but about the mentality of this team right now. And once you get into the tournament, I mean, they were all talking about this in open locker room after the NC State loss, but at this point, it's win or go home. And getting into that state of mind and, letting those stakes really kind of sit with you. And I'm really curious. I have no idea really how they're going to come out. But I think that if they're still kind of in a mental funk, then Duke is 100% on upset watch. Because, a slow, stout team who was running a deep rotation can 100% outlast them. And so I think it's really going to be if they can get their heads right and really get focused and really get into postseason playing mode.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think one more thing, just looking at their stats, is they don't draw a lot of fouls. Obviously, they have their tallest guy is 6'8", but they don't foul. They're 27th in the country in like fouls or free throws given per field goal attempt. And so for Duke, for a team that Flip and Mark Mitchell both rely on drawing fouls down low, that could be a problem. You've seen it at times this year where Flip and Mark both get frustrated down low when they don't get calls and things don't go their way. So I think if they kind of have some shots that don't fall early and they want to call and they don't get it, and things can get out of hand quick, and Vermont can really take advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I also wanted to mention we've been talking about Foster, but as far as the recording of this podcast, we haven't gotten any update on Foster's availability. He was in a boot still in DC, if that's correct.
He was walking around though without his scooter.
Okay, so yeah, we'll see. Char didn't say anything about that, but yeah, we'll update this or let you guys know if anything changes for that. I guess just looking at the whole South region, we can look at it a little bit. Don't want to get too speculative here, but
weird region.
It's a pretty strange region. So Houston is the 1 seed. Obviously been one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country all year. You got Marquette as the 2, Kentucky is the 3. But in Duke's little like mini region. If Duke were to beat Vermont, they would face the winner of Wisconsin and James Madison. Wisconsin as a 5 seed really started off the season pretty well, but has lost like 13 games I think this season, which is kind of unusual for a 5 seed. But played well, kind of in the Big Ten tournament. But are there any teams that I don't know you're looking at in this region that could possibly beat Duke, or you think maybe Duke has a matchup advantage of over some teams?
I can start. I think it's interesting. First, you mentioned NC State is also in their region,
Oh yeah,
which would be a fun one, but which I don't think will happen. But I think, honestly, I think Duke and Houston could be a pretty solid and fun matchup to watch. Houston is coming off getting absolutely shelled in the Big 12 championship, but they're a little banged up, just like Duke is, guard wise. But I think same kind of deal with Vermont, and Houston plays slow, and their shot making is not incredible, but they play incredible defense. So I think for Duke, if they got there and maybe they get Foster back, who knows? Um, could maybe get into kind of one of those games with like they had against Virginia, where if they just start off on the right foot and kind of knock Houston back from the jump, that Houston's offense might not be able to keep up. Um, but I do have Houston beating Duke in my bracket. But I do think that'd be an interesting matchup. And then James Madison, I think, who Duke could play in the second round, is also extremely intriguing.
Duke playing the Dukes. That's so funny.
Besides that, I think James Madison is one of, if not like one of the best mid majors in the country. They only lost 3 games all year. 2 of them were to App State. They beat Michigan State to start the year. I remember watching that. It was a big deal then. And so I just think, for Duke, that could be interesting. They're the second best 3-point defense in the country, and Duke has 3 guys that can shoot it at the guard spot. But if they get off and James Madison can throw them off, they could be on upset watch in the second round if they get past Vermont.
This is less of a who do I think Duke could beat, but more just who do I think will get beat. I have been really low on Marquette and Kentucky all year. I don't like either of them. I think, one, we've seen Marquette is not the same team when Tyler Kolek isn't playing, and I think he's expected to be back for the tournament. But expected and playing are 2 very different things. And who knows if he'll even be back to like his full amazing self, right? And so Marquette without that, I worry about. I also think their average height isn't all that big, and I think backcourts win in March, but you also need a little bit of size. And so when they come up kind of against those bigger, more physical teams, I worry about Marquette a little bit. And then Kentucky does not know what defense is. They have great players, right? Reed Shepherd, I voted for him as my National Freshman of the Year. Like, I think he's so good. Rob Dillingham is also great. Calipari knows how to coach teams to score. He does not know how to coach teams to stop the other team from doing that. And so do I think that Kentucky could make a run at the title? Yeah. Do I also think that they could get bounced in the first round and lose by 20? Yep. And so I feel like if it's kind of if you're picking between one of those 2 things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, which means they win a game or 2 and then concede a lot and go out. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in Kentucky or Marquette. So maybe that opens the door for a Duke run. But either way, weird region.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in really most of the teams in this region.
Yeah, fair.
I think Houston's going to end up kind of running away with it. I have them as my title pick. I know as fun as NC State's ACC tournament run was, I think that they get trounced in the first round. I think that they spent all their money there. But I think that especially on, the bottom half of that bracket with Kentucky and Marquette, I think everyone here really, besides Houston in my mind, is on upset watch. Anyone could really come away with it. James Madison is really fun. I don't think that they're going to beat Wisconsin, but I think a Duke's versus Duke matchup in the round of 32 would be fun. But I think that besides Houston, this is kind of anyone's game, but I think Houston comes out on top pretty easily.
I will say, you just said it's anyone's game, and 2 teams that probably should not be 10 seeds that both are Boise State and Colorado, who have to play in the play-in game on Wednesday. And I think either one of them, like Colorado came in on an 8-game win streak before they lost in the conference championship, and Boise State's been one of the better teams in the Mountain West all year. So I think we just talked about Marquette and a bigger team. Eddie Lampkin from Colorado is huge.
KJ Simpson
and
should have won Pac-12 Player of the Year.
KJ Simpson and Tristan Silver are both incredible. So I think if Colorado or Boise, honestly, whoever comes out of that first game could easily make a run to, the Sweet 16.
Especially since they're playing Florida. Like, I was so high on Florida, and then their center broke his leg.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang it, that was gonna be my kind of Cinderella.
That's what you were
sweep and-
upset about?
What?
That's what you were
Yeah.
upset about? You lost your Cinderella pick?
Yeah.
Nah,
No, Best,
definitely wish him
best wishes to him. I hope his recovery is going smoothly, and I'm sad that my Cinderella, I don't feel as confident anymore.
All right. Yeah, no, I agree with all you guys. I was like spending yesterday. I'm like, who do I like out of this region? And well, I'll tell you guys who I chose in the end. But Rachel gave a little teaser there of her title pick. But let's go through our final fours and title picks and say who we got. Rachel, you started with yours, so I'll let you start here. But talk about your final four and your champion.
Yeah, so I've Houston coming out on top. I think that they're now going to go on a tear after losing in the Big 12 championship game. I don't think anyone's really going to be able to stop them. Rounding out my final four, I have UConn. I think that, yes, their region is really difficult, but I think that they're going to be able to get through it. I have a pretty early North Carolina exit. I have them losing to Michigan State, so I think Arizona is the one who comes out of the West, and I have Creighton coming out of the Midwest. I have no faith in Purdue. Maybe that's just, I think I'm still a little bit scarred from last year, and that may never leave my brain, but that's my final four pick.
Awesome. Caleb?
Yeah, I'll start with Duke's region. We just talked about Kentucky can't play defense, and I have them in the championship game. I just foresee like they're like one of the biggest teams in the country. They can score. I just see them going on just a monster tear, offense wise. Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepard are both so fun. Antonio Reeves is a great veteran for them. Midwest down low, I have Creighton beating Purdue as well. I think Ryan Kalkbrenner is one of the few guys big enough to contain Zach Edey in the country. And Baylor Shireman's obviously great for Creighton as well. On the other side, I have Baylor and Iowa State, two Big 12 teams coming out. I think Baylor, after watching them play Duke, their defense is just so solid. Eve Messi is great. Jacoby Walter's great. And then Iowa State is maybe no one's as hot as Iowa State right now, besides NC State maybe. They just torched Houston. They're the best defense in the country by a decent amount. And so, defense wins championships, so my championship is Iowa State and Kentucky. Best offense, best defense. I have Iowa State winning the whole thing.
I like that. Mine is either gonna be really smart or the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life.
Well,
Anyway, I'm gonna echo what Caleb said about Baylor. I think in that region, a lot of people are talking about Carolina and they're talking about Arizona, and I think Baylor is being slept on because it's in the same region as both of those two. I agree with the defense. I really like Jacoby Walter. I think he's amazing. And the Big 12 is good. Like, they've played hard teams all year, which I think translates really well to March. Looking up to what region is UConn in the East region?
Yeah.
Okay, East region. I don't have UConn. I have Auburn. For my money, Auburn is the hottest team in the country right now. They just tore through the SEC, have been playing really well all year. Kind of again, sort of similar to Baylor, like haven't been getting the same spotlight, but have just been kind of putting in the work. And the SEC is a good conference, and they're riding really hot. So I think I'm just going to keep with that. Looking to another region, I've got Tennessee coming out of. I'm getting mixed up on all the regions. Midwest. Okay. Yeah, Tennessee coming out of the Midwest region. I think Purdue gets bounced before those two teams would play each other. I said in December or January. I think Dalton Knecht is awesome, and Zakai Ziegler is super underrated as a guard. They also know how to play defense. I think Rick Barnes finally gets him to the Final Four. And then in the South, I'm actually taking Duke, and I think the reason is I like the Houston matchup. I don't trust Marquette and Kentucky. And so I think if Duke gets past that Houston matchup, it's a pretty straight shot to the Final Four. But I have Duke losing there to Tennessee, and then I have Auburn beating Baylor. So my title game's two SEC teams with the Vols on top.
awesome. I like all the differences here. I'll round it out. I have more differences, but starting in the East, I also have Auburn. I think that Sweet 16 matchup against UConn is just going to be brutal. I've been going back and forth on that for a long time. But I think I'm going to stick with Auburn. Could change to UConn, so TBD. But yeah, I think Auburn's just playing super well, and Bruce Pearl's a great March coach, and I think UConn's the best team in the country, and I don't think this changes that. I just maybe like on a game, like Auburn will catch them off guard, maybe one game, and so I have Auburn coming out of the East. And then in the West, I have North Carolina. I think the play of North Carolina has been really, really impressive recently. I know they lost in the championship game and didn't look great, but the supporting cast around RJ Davis and Baycott has been really impressive to me, specifically Elliot Cadeau's play. Cormac Ryan also obviously looked great against Duke, but Cadeau's been just an amazing floor general. Who's good at finishing around the rim. He's been playing great defense. And then they have size. Like their bench has been playing really good. We talked about Duke's lack of bench production, but when you have North Carolina, who's Jalen Withers, and Seth Trimble playing well off the bench, I think they can make a deep run. Going up to the South, we talked about how I didn't like anyone. I have Marquette coming out of the South. I'm kind of banking on Kolek's health. I know you're mentioning that, but I think Marquette's only lost to UConn and Creighton since like December, and they've beaten every other team like that. And I'm kind of banking on the fact that they're very, solid both offensively and defensively. They're super hard to guard on pick and rolls, and Cam Jones, I think, is a really underrated player who can 6'6" guard, who can just shoot over people and make plays. And I think Marquette has a really good coach. I love Shaka Smart, and I think his ability after kind of losing a little bit early last year, I think he can kind of get his team ready and through that region. I think they're a solid team who's beaten some quality teams in their non-conference schedule. So I have them coming out of the South. And then out of the Midwest, I have Purdue. I think that Purdue is getting pretty undervalued because, like, obviously Zach Edey is great. I think this year their guard play is like night and day from last year. I think Lance Jones was a great pickup. And you get another year of Fletcher Loyer and Braden Smith. They shoot the lights out of the ball, and they have Zach Edey in the center. It's just really hard to guard. And I think they still lack some athleticism, and their defense is good. Like their defense is good. It's not elite, but it's very good still. And I think they can make it out of there. I think they'll have Creighton in the Elite Eight, which will be a really good matchup, and I can see either of those teams coming out of the Midwest. Going to the Final Four, I have Purdue and North Carolina in the title game, and Purdue winning. I I think that the right side of the bracket, if you look at like the Midwest and South, is a little bit easier. So I think this is more a factor of like I think Purdue is going to have a pretty favorable path, and I think they can get it done against North Carolina in a title game. Kind of do like a repeat of 2019 Virginia after losing to a 16 seed and then winning the national championship the next year. Um, I think Matt Painter's a great coach in March. I mean, he led them to the Elite Eight, and I think this is a good team. So we'll see what happens. They could easily, get bounced early, just like any of these teams, but shaping up to be a fun March. I guess lastly, we can talk about some sleepers. If anyone has maybe a higher seed going farther in their bracket than most people would expect. Rachel, do you want to start with you?
Yeah. I don't have many high seats. I think that I will say. So I did pick in my bracket this. I have JMU losing in the first round.
Mhm.
However, I think that they could 100% make a run. Especially if Duke is not. I think that Duke, not playing at its full potential can get past the Vermont team. I don't know if they can make it out of the round of 32 if they're not where they're at. And so I think if James Madison can get by Wisconsin, they've got a pretty great guard team. JMU does, and so I think that they could at least kind of make it to the Sweet 16 and face Houston. So even if I don't pick them, even if I didn't pick them, I think that they definitely people should be on alert for them.
Yeah, I can go. I have two. They're in the same region, which is a little unfortunate. I have Grand Canyon first. I said at the start of the year in the Chronicle office that I thought Grand Canyon would win a tournament game this year, and they've only lost, I think, 4 games all year. One of them was to South Carolina. And so I've just kind of been on them all year, and I can't really give it up now. They have good guard play. They have a great coach, the Drew family. They have Bryce Drew, Scott Drew's little brother. They both just coach. That family can just coach. And so I think, St. Mary's is a very tough matchup for them. St. Mary's kind of controls the tempo of the game and makes you kind of play their way. But if they get past St. Mary's, they play Alabama, who's kind of like Kentucky, can get hot or get really cold. Or Charleston, I guess, Alabama or Charleston. But I have Alabama. And so I think Grand Canyon can win that too, and then Sweet 16. My other one is Dayton. I think Deron Holmes is one of the best players in the country. I don't think that's a hot take or anything. And, people are kind of starting to I think they're getting a little undervalued because they just lost in the A10 tournament. But I think, we could talk about star players. There's always stars of March, and I think Deron Holmes could be one of those for sure.
This is not like a high seed by numbers perspective, but it's a high seed in terms of the region that it's in. I think Washington State is getting slept on a little bit. They finished second in the Pac-12, beat Arizona twice. They didn't run super far in the Pac-12 tournament, but that was a bit of a wacky tournament in the first place. They've got two players averaging over 15 points, another one just over 12, another one at 10. So they can kind of share the wealth, play a pretty deep rotation, and I also just think proving that you can beat big teams works, and especially when you're put in probably the hardest region in this bracket as a 7 seed. I don't know. Like I think the door is more open for Washington State than some people are saying, just given how hard the region is. But they've proven that they can take it to the big boys when they play them. So I think they can. I don't know if they will, but I think they have the chance to.
Yeah, I like it. I'm actually going to go somewhere similar in the region, and in that same region, it's not a super high seed, but BYU as a 6. I have them going to the Elite 8. I think they could make the Final Four if Auburn was to take out UConn. A couple reasons. One, BYU is so balanced. Like, they're such a good offensive team, and they move the ball so well, and they shoot the lights out of it. They kind of live and die by the 3, so it's a little bit of like a flyer, but like if they're on, like, they're tough to guard. Iowa State, one of the best defensive teams in the country, gave up 90 to BYU. And I think if they were to meet in like the Sweet 16, BYU's not scared of Iowa State. They've beaten them once. They almost beat them in their place again. And so I think that could be a good matchup for BYU. And if they're shooting well, they can make a deep run. So that's kind of my sleeper. But yeah, a lot of I think it's such a wide open bracket. I think there can be some fun stuff in that East region. But yeah, I think that covers it. Thank you, guys. This is super fun. We have a lot of great coverage on our site, dukechronicle.com. We'll have all this. We have our bracket preview. Some of our beats are going to do a chat with all our brackets. You can see them online. If you're on campus, be sure to pick up print editions of the Chronicle. And that has great coverage of both our men's and women's team. Duke women are going to actually be playing in Columbus this weekend. Have a first round date with Richmond, who they actually played in the first game of the season. But I think a big storyline with that is that Ohio State is the 2 seed in that little mini region, and they have former Duke Blue Devil Celeste Taylor. So that's definitely going to be super exciting if that matchup were to happen. But yeah, the print edition has some great coverage of both the men's and women's team, and then also on dukechronicle.com. Got a lot of good stuff there. So be sure to check it out. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoy March Madness as much as we do and have a good time watching it this weekend. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Cameron Chronicles.